Welcome back to Regaining the Balance. We are going to be reading more part two of the Philosophy of Fire. This is going to be a long one, probably. So, I understand if you guys don't stick with the whole thing, but I think this is a pretty cool book, and I'm just doing this as a way of I don't know, so that you guys can absorb some of these books without having to read them, because sometimes it's easier to listen to something than it is to sit down and read it, because people don't always have a lot of time to do that kind of thing. So, Philosophy of Fire. And this book has a lot to do with the Emerald Tablets and pretty much every single religion across the world. So it's worth checking out, I think. And we're going to see how many more nuggets we can pick up off of this thing. So without further ado, let's get the good old there we go. All right, so hopefully the sound will be good. I don't think I'm too loud. Maybe turn it down just a little bit. Okay. All right. So here we go. The Ancient Mysteries. All religious and all occult and mystical schools have their foundation in the ancient mysteries taught in the secret schools of antiquity as they are today. The belief in a supreme power is inherent in every human being, and so thoroughly interwoven with our nature is this sentiment that it is impossible for anyone at any period of life wholly to divest himself of it. When the reflecting man looks around upon all the objects about him, the question naturally arises: what has called this world into existence? Why does it exist? What is its ultimate destiny? Why do I exist? What will become of me after death? The answers to these questions can only be given by and through a long course of philosophical investigation and individual training. These problems have been the study of the ablest men from the earliest ages, and have given rise to all the various systems of philosophy and religion which have prevailed in all times, beginning with the first conscious being and coming down to our own day and generation. Of one thing we are certain: the first religion that we have any account of was far superior to any of those formulated in later centuries, because it was a religion of both living and believing in place of a religion of faith only. I have reference to the philosophy of the Atlanteans. Theirs was the, I have reference to the philosophy of the Atlanteans, which apparently I'm gonna, if this is a book or something, I'll have to find this as well. Theirs was the pure fire philosophy. Not only was it in a virgin and absolute philosophical religion, but at the same time it gave them those powers which a truly religious life will always confer upon the faithful neophyte. The philosophy of fire of the Atlanteans not merely inculcated a strict morality, a blameless life and loyalty to the school which taught it, but it likewise demanded obedience to the laws governing health, strength, and power. This philosophy, under whatever name it has since passed, always gives wisdom and power to its initiates. It is only with these philosophies I will deal at the present, and set forth the history in compact form of those systems of philosophy which worship at the shrine of fire, symbol at once of love and of God, and believe this to be all potent. The philosophers of these systems do not worship the fire, as the profane suppose, but recognize the flame of the fire as a symbol of that supreme hierarch which they believe in and know to be all-powerful and absolute, and which can be personified only by the fire which is life, and love which is eternal. An author has said, "It is to be presumed that when the minds of men were directed to the subject of the mysterious things of nature which they could not comprehend, they were forced to conceal their ignorance of the ultimate causes of all the phenomena by which they were constantly surrounded, and as constantly called upon to explain, that then, as well as present, their inventive talents were exercised to conceal their ignorance by systems of terminology," i.e. differentiation, right? This is not altogether true. The mysteries did not have their origin in such a manner, but rather because the initiates of these mysteries were aware it would be unwise to give the true meanings of the mysteries to the masses, therefore inventing symbols and ceremonies, thereby teaching those who were not prepared to receive the truth or who were unable to worship God in the abstract. It is, however, conceded that the rites and ceremonies were originally pure in character and had the power to impress the minds of the initiates with a suitable feeling of awe and reverence for those who taught the mysteries, and likewise a desire to be personally benefited through obedience to the instructions such teachers were willing to give. One who claims to be an authority on the subject has said, "It is impossible to definitely assert in what country the mysteries were first introduced. Authors differ very materially upon that question. It is, however, very certain that while there are various changes to be found in the mysteries of the different nations of the Orient, there was a great similarity in them all, so much so that we may conclude either that they were all independent copies from a great original system, or that they were propagated one from another until they were spread over the whole of Asia, Europe, and that part of Africa peopled from Asia and in the constant intercourse therewith. The first wave from that region, now known as Arya Varta, was to the southeast across the great rivers into that part of India where they found a people descended from the Turanian families who had come from the north and northeast. We are informed that when the Aryans entered the country of India, they carried with them traditions, manners, customs, religious ideas, which differed very materially from those possessed by the first inhabitants, who were, no doubt, of Turanian descent. Pardon me for a second. I'll have to wet my whistle from time to time. This author is mistaken in several respects. We know absolutely that these mysteries primarily came from Atlantis, then connected with Yucatan, where the ruins of the fire philosophers still remain, and that the initiation into these mysteries was first had there. We know that in the Temple of Atlantis, these mysteries were first taught to the neophytes, and that these mysteries were brought into Asia and India, thence into Egypt by the initiates of the older schools of Atlantis. The author may well say, while there are various changes to be found in the mysteries of the different nations of the Orient, it is also certain that there was a great similarity in them all. Why should they be unlike in their spirit, though possibly different in the letter, since all of them were from the same source? True, changes have been made in both form and name, but this has only been done to meet the customs and race beliefs of the various people and ages. All the secret schools founded on the fire philosophy come from the one source. In their spirit, they are the same, simply taking form under different names, as the fraternity, now called the Rose Cross, was known as the Paracelsians, alchemists, and illuminated brethren. It has never been the same great school under names in harmony with the age. Oh, it has ever, pardon me, not never. It has ever been the same great school under names in harmony with the age and the needs of the peoples. The great school of the Magi, the initiates, the alchemists, and the secret priesthood, known and designated also by other names, has never for a moment ceased to exist. This school has often, though secret and unknown, shaped the course of empires, controlled the fate of nations. France and its Napoleon Marlion is an excellent example. Without the help of Count Germain, Napoleon never could have been the mighty master of strategy he was, a mastership torn from him when he became self-centered and arrogant, working for glory instead of humanity's good. I recently saw a very interesting picture of Napoleon being attacked from all these different sides, and it's I'll have to bring that up when we do a little analysis at the end of this reading. I'll find that one for you guys. These initiates and masters, seeking always the line of the least resistance and knowing both when and how to act, having always in view only one object, that is, the welfare and progress of humanity and the greatest good to the greatest number, despising fame and worldly honors, working, quote, without the hope of fee or reward, unquote, concealed their labors, and either influenced those who knew them not to do their work or work through agents pledged to conceal their very existence. The public generally, which cannot comprehend why one should do unselfish service without hope of compensation, this is a matter of little interest or importance. To the seeker for wisdom and enlightenment and the initiate, it is of great interest, indicating, as it does, the role played by the masters of the secret schools in their desire to be of help to humanity. It will likewise reveal to them the meaning and goal of human evolution and development, and give them the unqualified assurance that such development is being aided by those who know those who know now, as it has not been for many centuries. This work has now become possible because of a cycle of enlightenment, when the workers are unlikely to be sacrificed by an inquisition, although they may be persecuted for their beliefs or their teachings. Such secret masters and initiates do exist, and they are truly possessed of profound knowledge. They are ready to help the denizens of the world, but these must be ready and willing to receive help if they are to be benefited by it. Guided by a complete philosophy, armed with a key to symbolism, aided by the initiates and the secret schools, the lost mysteries may be restored and confer their benefits upon the races of men now so badly in need of the instructions and help these schools can confer. Mere vulgar curiosity and secrecy alone have never been and never will be the password to the aditum, or true initiation. It necessitates something more than curiosity to find the gate of the path that leads to soul illumination, initiation. It requires a heart that throbs for the welfare of humanity and a love for equal opportunity and justice to all. He alone who seeks initiation because he desires help and thereby seeks to confer a benefit upon his fellow man can hope to reach the goal of attainment. A history of those who have become initiates would necessarily be tinged with a touch of pathos on account of the many sorrowful disappointments it would record. In the case of earnest souls seeking with sincerity and in truth for the quote lost word of the masters, unquote, the key that unlocks the magic wand of power and points the way to the soul and proofs of immortality, who, for their earnestness and sincerity and their loyalty to those who taught them, ultimately were publicly executed as malefactors and enemies of state or church, as most of them have been in the past. Excuse me. And I could think of a couple different people right now off the top of my head who are probably part of this group of people. However, no one has sought the path to initiation in love and humility without having found entrance to the secret schools, and proving faithful and loyal, reached the goal where they were brought face to face with the sublime mysteries and the knowledge that love leads to God, and that both love and God are symbolized by the sacred, ever-burning fire. That same fire which Moses of old saw burning in the bush as he would have passed it, and from whence issued the voice which commanded him to be the savior of his race. That these secret schools and their masters should exist throughout all time and remain without history seems at first a strange paradox. The enemies of the mysteries and sacred philosophy will urge this fact as a reason for rejecting all that is herein contained, ignorant of the fact that few histories of any people or any epoch are better founded. Ain't that the truth? Foremost among all these detractors or deniers will be found the bigoted sectarian and the modern materialist. And I'm not sure why I highlighted this one, but with each of these, the real genius of the mysteries is in perpetual conflict, of course. For the first, the equal rights and privilege of justice to all men is a dead letter, for he believes only he himself and his chosen associates can be saved. For the second, the materialist, the recognition of the divine principle in man and belief in the immortality of the soul will prove a stumbling block of equal terror. Fortunately, the number of bigoted sectarians and out-and-out materialists are few, maybe in your day, but these few seemingly are in authority and able to prosecute or persecute all those who may not be in their way to their way of thinking. The historical deficiency referred to is by no means without a parallel. The superstructure known as Christianity has, it is true, many historical phases of dogmas, the most contradictory of dogmas the most contradictory, of doctrines promulgated in one age, enforced with vice-regal authority and severe penalties for denial and disbelief, only to be denied and repudiated as, quote, damnable heresy in another age. Great point. In the meantime, the origin of these doctrines and personality of the man of sorrows around which these traditions cluster receives no adequate support from authentic history. Simply because there is no true history of the birth and life of Jesus to be had, or for the reason Orthodox Christianity has not been able to produce a history of those they make pretensions of following, but whom they have never really known, must we conclude that it is all a fable, and that there was no Jesus of Nazareth, that the legend was put forth and kept alive by designing men and thereby to supporting their pretensions to authority? That's a good question. Are historical facts and personal biography alone entitled to credit? While everlasting principles, divine beneficence, and the laying down of one's life for another are of no account? Is that which has inspired the hope and brightened the lives of the downtrodden and despairing for ages a mere fancy, a designing lie? Tear every shred of history from the life of Jesus today and prove beyond controversy that he never existed, and humanity, from its heart of hearts, would create him again tomorrow and justify the creation by every need of the daily life of man. And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the archetype. And we will be going into detail about the archetype in a video coming up. The historical content might be given up, totally ignored, and the whole character, genius, and mission of Jesus, who became the Christ, be none the less real, beneficent, and eternal, with all its human and dramatic episodes. Explain it as you will, it can never be explained away. The character remains, and whether historical or ideal, it is real and eternal. Christ is no myth. This digression serves to illustrate a principle of interpretation. The traditions and symbols of mysticism and the philosophy of fire, or the pathway to the soul, do not derive their real value from historical data, but from the universal and eternal truth which they embody, and from the fact that all teachings and symbolisms of the secret schools are founded on the divine philosophy that the soul is a smaller edition of the Father, that this soul is manifested through fire in the form of love for one's fellow man, for truth, for the greatest good to all, and finally in the heart's desire to portray God. Love is the only bond that can bind man to man and all men to God. Were these representations historical episodes only, the world in its cyclical evolution would long have since swept by and buried them in the eternal oblivion. They are facts imparted by initiate to initiate in the secret schools from time immemorial, even as now. Such great truth, obscured and lost in one age by misinterpretation or persecution, rise phoenix-like, rejuvenated in the next. Yeah, Nate. Phoenix-like. I'm going to be doing a huge expose on the Phoenicians and their connections with these secret schools, and also with the origins of Christ. So it's funny that he mentions this. I probably won't even mention the Phoenicians, but a lot of them drop these little hints all over the place that are associated. I just want to digress there. Continuing, we should not say lost. All right, so such great truth, obscured and lost in one age by misinterpretation or persecution, rise phoenix-like, rejuvenated in the next. We should not say lost. They are merely suppressed and held in the secret archives of the great school to be again promulgated when the time is opportune. They are immortal truth, knowing neither decay nor death, and they are like divine images concealed in a block of stone, which many artists assail with a mallet and chisel, square and compass, only perchance to release a distorted idol. Only the master workman and the initiate can so chip away the stone as to reveal in all its grandeur and beauty the divine ideal and endow it with the breath of life. Such is the builder of the soul. Ceremonial initiation can never make one either a master or an initiate. It requires a master teacher to accept man in his crude or materialistic state, and through instruction, training, and development lead him to initiation, and this can only be accomplished by a process of growth and rigid system of training. No genuine mystic imbued with the spirit of liberality will treat any religion with derision or contempt, or will exclude from fellowship anyone who believes in the existence of God. The fight of free choice to all men and freedom of action so long as such action does not interfere with others. This spirit is the foundation of mysticism, and any departure from it leads away from the path of wisdom and directly opposite to the fundamental thought of the. And here goes some kind of code here. Okay, some school. The secret schools have for ages held aloft the torchlight of toleration, equity, and fraternity. The bigoted sectarian, whoever he may be, divides the world into two classes: those who, with zeal and blind faith, accept his dogmas, and those who do not. The first he calls brother, the second class he regards as enemies who must be persecuted. And it's funny how we're going to constantly hear about this held aloft the torch of light of toleration, equity, and fraternity. And again, with fire, all that kind of stuff. Now, you know, imagine, just put in your head the Statue of Liberty. All right, and understand that the Statue of Liberty actually probably represents all of this one line right here. It's probably what actually is what made the Statue of Liberty what it is and what it represents. Just keep that in mind. I'm just saying, because that's not the first time I've read this in different kinds of books like this, and it's very interesting how things like the Statue of Liberty, holding a torch and holding on to books, and I'm not sure if the books say anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if it said toleration, equity, and fraternity. Anyhow, the secret schools, continuing, the secret schools, it is true, demand obedience to laws and instructions from all those who desire to travel the path. But these schools do not and never did attempt to force upon outsiders any of their beliefs or philosophies. The distinction between the esoteric and exoteric doctrines was always, even from the very earliest times, preserved among the initiates. It came from the Egyptian school up to the time of Alexander, and after that they resorted for instructions and mysteries to other schools, namely to those of Asia, as well as those of ancient Thrace, Sicily, Etruria, and other countries. The more profound secrets of the mysteries cannot be revealed or taught by means of ceremonial initiation. They belong only to those few who are willing to live the life and therefore grow into knowledge conferred by such living. To experience is to know, to be taught is merely to believe and nothing more. These secrets must be taught by the individual. The neophyte is debarred from possessing them solely by his own inattention to the hints everywhere given by the initiates of the secret schools, such as the Magi, the Rosicrucians, the alchemists, and those of Ulysses. If one prefers to treat the whole subject with contempt, to deny that any such real knowledge exists, it becomes evident that he not only closes the door against the possibility of himself possessing such knowledge, but even becomes impervious to any evidence of its existence that might come to him. That is such a good point on so many levels, not just on this. Continuing, he has no one but himself to blame if he is left in darkness. Seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Such has ever been the divine command. I agree with that. So long as the struggle for bare existence evolves as it does today, the greater part of the energy, time, and opportunities of man, he may never discover the real meaning of life or the purpose of human existence. I've talked a little bit about that while reading the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, actually. Even this much may be discerned from physical evolution alone. From the study of human brain, in which there is a continually increasing portion of gray substance set free from the functions incident to the preservation of the physical structure. Oh, this is an old book. And evidently designed to be appropriated to separate in higher use. Mere intellectual activities alone connect with the physical plane with the maintenance and enjoyment of life, will not explain the philosophy of cerebral development. It is only when man divides his day of 24 hours into 3 equal parts, 1/3 for labor, wherein to obtain the necessity of life, 1/3 for rest, and 1/3 for recreation, self-improvement, and the awakening of his higher self, that he will become the balanced being God, his creator, had intended him to be. This is the rational and natural doctrine taught by the initiates and instructors in the secret schools. You know what that means, guys? That means no 8-hour workdays. Or wait, maybe. I don't know. No, I don't think so. There are latent powers and almost infinite capabilities in man, the meaning of which he has hardly dreamed of possessing, nor will leisure and intellectual cultivation alone reveal these powers. It is only through a complete, balanced philosophy of the entire nature of man and the capacities and destiny of the human soul, supplemented by the use of such knowledge, that man will eventually come into possession of his birthright and begin the journey to perfection. It is such a path the initiates would lead man to follow, knowing as they do from long experience it is the only one that leads the goal of rejuvenation of the entire being called man. Two conditions at the present moment stand squarely in the way of such achievement. First, anarchy and confusion, a non-belief in law and order, the result of selfishness in social relation. This plight can be overcome in but one way, vis-a-vis the recognition of the unqualified, equal rights of all men to seek knowledge and wisdom in their own way, not as a theory, as a religious duty, or a mere matter of sentiment, but as a fact in nature, a universal and divine law, the penalty for the violation of which is precisely the conditions under which humanity now struggles and suffers. I'm going to take a quick drink of that. Wow, I feel like he hit that one on the head. The second condition, which has given rise to confusion among the workmen, in building the social temple and the individual habitation of man, are false ideals, inefficient methods of education, and almost total ignorance of the finer forces, potentialities, and soul fire possessed by man, until these divine inheritances are well nigh starved to death and only the physical and intellectual part of man survives. The result of this ignorance may be seen in the fact that hardly one individual in a million who has both leisure and opportunity attains real advancement in the evolution of the higher powers possessed, nor is he cognizant of the fact that he may become a living soul with all that such possession might mean to him. This ought not to be so, nor need it be, if earnest men and women would seek diligently, first for the cause of all our ills, and second for an efficient remedy. This remedy is found first in knowledge, second in obedience to creative laws. And I would add co-creative laws to that. If real knowledge in the nature of the soul and destiny of man had never existed, our present status would be pitiable in the extreme. But when we demonstrate that this knowledge always existed, at times only in the secret archives of the great school, that it became degraded by selfishness and then suppressed by design, that for centuries designing priests, many of whom would have disgraced the scaffold, but have been canonized as saints, have done their utmost to deprive humanity of this knowledge. What shall humanity say? Shall mankind preach the equal rights of all men, toleration to all beliefs, and yet seek revenge on the priesthood? 1,000 times no, but rather leave priests and proletariat to settle their own affairs and go their own way, and let us go to work ourselves to establish the ancient schools, wherein all those who seek may be taught the way of life. Knowing these things as we do, we can condemn the arc fraternities who have for a time hidden this knowledge, so saving it for our future. Knowing these things as we do, can we condemn the arc fraternities who have for a time hidden this knowledge, to saving it for future races? Should we not rather be thankful to them for keeping it in its virgin purity? In all our popular present religious instructions, beginning with childhood and through all the ministrations of religions thereafter, we are taught to look very sharply after the salvation of our souls. And this is in the face of the statement that a very large proportion of the human race will eventually be utterly lost, damned for all eternity. Science, exactly. Science forms another picture by trying to demonstrate that the struggle for existence is a necessary condition for improvement in every department of man's nature, pointing out that all the great leaders of the past were indefatigable workers, while the laggard fell prey to the strong, which is undoubtedly true, but does not go far enough dealing only with the physical man, forgetful of the spiritual counterpart. To the scientist, self-preservation at the expense of others of the human family is regarded as the, quote, first law of life, unquote. What is the result? The world is chaotic. Man is against man. The spiritual life of all nations is at its lowest ebb. Faith in law and order at a minimum. Confidence in neighbor, neither legislator, physician, or minister. Until we can bring man to an understanding that he is a complex, combined being, pointed out to him that he must develop the inner spirit and the spiritual being in harmony with the external man, this chaos will continue to increase until revolution, which turns man against man in blood, shall cast the pall of night over humanity. It is not reasonable to suppose that if humanity generally were possessed of real knowledge, it might govern their actions, so shaping their lives as to avoid the pitfalls of ignorance and set its feet on the line of a higher race development. Let me go back. This is the question. Is it not reasonable to suppose that if humanity generally were possessed of real knowledge, it might govern their actions, so shaping their lives as to avoid the pitfalls of ignorance and set its feet on the line of a higher race development? I've asked the same question. Religion, that of the soul, which comes from the heart rather than the head, offers faith, and through faith all things become possible. This is the science religion of the initiates and the basis of the secret schools. There is but one source of real knowledge, namely self-awakening, development, and enlightenment through mystic philosophy. The doctrine of equal rights and opportunity to all men must be and is the only basis of true ethics. The great republic, which is jealous of the rights of every man, great or small, is the ideal state. If these concepts were accepted and acted upon, there would result time, opportunity, and the power to apprehend the deeper and higher problems of the origin, nature, and destiny of man. Man is not man as yet, and will not be until he has sought and found his soul, that living fire which allies him with the Creator of all mankind, namely, God the Father of all, the high and the low, wise and the ignorant, and who would have the ignorant to become wise, the weak like the strong, and the low equal to the greatest. What man may become or what he might accomplish under favorable conditions is seldom dreamed of by humanity and is only visualized for us by the lives of the great masters of the past. There is widespread and increasing conviction that true education, that which deals with the whole man, would prove a panacea for all our evils, and that if we could begin with the training of the children, we could eventually reform society, that even the children of vicious parentage might be transformed from criminals in embryo to useful citizens to whom no longer lingered any trace of the desire to commit crime or disobey law. Such a system of education would not merely include the branches at present taught in our schools and colleges, but would likewise include a harmonious physical training, a method of mental development, and thorough instruction in constructive sex science. Interesting. And he's got a little asterisk here, so I'll read that. The Humanitarian Society was founded for the express purpose of imparting instruction in intersex laws, higher race development, dietetics for health and strength, and the mental development for constructive purposes. Sounds like an interesting group. The demand for a real higher inner educational and training is becoming insistent. let me step back. I made a little laugh about this, but there's a lot of crazy energy when sexual energy is something really real, and so I'm not going to say too much about that, but I know for a fact that there is some powerful stuff in sex energy, and that's why you see why sex is used to sell practically everything, and you know what I'm saying. Continuing. The demand for a real higher inner education and training is becoming insistent. Such an education would necessarily mean the bringing out of the highest in man. It would be a fourfold and rational development of the entire being. Only by teaching the truth, not as supposed to be by materialists or theological educators, but as the soul, the higher self in man teaches man what is right, will the race be elevated. Selfishness or material gain only is the keynote of the present-day educational system. Hence, it has miserably failed in established caste and class distinctions. I would agree with that. Nothing so shrouds the higher self, the real in man, in darkness and misconception as selfishness. This is the primary cause of the universal mistrust and hatred between classes and races. It should be towards this higher knowledge, once termed the ancient mysteries, which all useful and rational acquirement tend, and why should our efforts cease short of the very highest? All education that does not follow this direction with the final goal consistently and continually in view is false and is necessarily a failure. If this were not actually true, would individuals and nations be heading towards chaos as they now are? Oh, and by the way, this was written right before World War I, just as a point. Certainly, established systems of education and training have had a fair trial, and what has been the result? Mistrust of each other, anarchy, socialism, and disloyalty to the established government, condemnation of creeds and churchism, disbelief in medical science, and mistrust of the courts of justice, together with an almost universal sex degradation in millions of bodies staggering under the load of disease. Disease is the result of vice. This higher education, this ancient wisdom, is knowledge of the powers and requirements of the physical being, an understanding of the soul, of its origin, nature, potentialities, and the laws that govern its evolution and development. And this is precisely the knowledge which modern science fails to afford, but which the ancient science and the secret schools have taught in the mysteries, and is open today to all who truly seek. All preliminary study and training leading up to this, the quote, real measure of a man, unquote, just as all life should be constant evolution, so much all real knowledge or philosophy be an initiation proceeding in a natural order, advancing by specific quote unquote degrees of growth and unfoldment. These quote unquote degrees are materialized to some extent in the modern Masonic fraternity, in order which has much of the material hidden mysteries of antiquity, but which has lost the key, except in a few rare instances. Interesting. Now, these guys are kind of related to each other as far as the kind of information they have, and as they just said, the Masonic fraternity, an order which has much of the material and hidden mysteries of antiquity, but which has lost the key, except in a few rare instances. So, as much as, people like to just paint a big broad brush on these, secret societies or whatever, but they're not all the same, and I think a lot of them butt heads with each other, so I think it's better to look at them as individual organizations and, again, what they do and what are their fruits, if there are any. Continuing. Oh, and by the way, the idea of initiation here that they talk about is nothing more than a representation of a person's life, and or i.e. the hero's journey, if you guys know what that is. And I'll be going into that in another video. So back to the book. In the true initiation, that of gradual growth and becoming, the candidate or neophyte must always be worthy and well qualified, duly and truly prepared. That is, he must perceive that such knowledge exists, must desire to possess it, be willing to make every effort and whatever personal sacrifice is needed for its acquisition. He must have passed beyond the stage of blind belief or superstition, the bondage of fear, the age of fable, and the dominion of appetite and sense desires. This is the meaning of being duly and truly prepared. He must prove his fitness in these directions no less than show the absence in himself of that subtler form of intellectual selfishness which comes from the possession of what usually passes as knowledge, and from the desire for dominion through it over others less highly endowed, for selfish purposes of his own. His motives, therefore, alone will determine that he is, quote, worthy and well qualified, unquote. It is doubtfully true that on every plane of life, in the process by which knowledge is acquired, always by experience, man becomes that which he seeks to know. That is, knowing is a progressive becoming through experience. There results There results, therefore, a continuous transformation or transmutation of the motives, ideals, and perceptions of the individuality whenever in his daily experience in life he has placed on the lines of least resistance or the natural order of evolution. This is the science and philosophical meaning of the true initiation as taught by the secret schools and is termed the alchemical process of transforming or transmutation the lesser into the greater. And I have a little asterisk here. The asterisk says the secret school on order of the whatever AA is devoting its every effort to teach its neophyte this fourfold development in alchemical transmutation. Though generally unknown, it upholds the sacredness of religion in the family circle, loyalty to the government, and inculcates faith and trust in medicine, law, and order. I'm not sure about all that. See, again, I'm just reading this book. I'm not saying I really believe in a lot of this kind of, not everything that they say, but this does have a lot of interesting stuff to be picked out if you guys know how to read between the lines. So, that's why I'm reading out the whole book. So, you guys can see for yourselves what it says or hear for yourselves what it says. And if something catches your ear, then, go find it and take a quicker look because there's a lot of connecting stuff with lots of other things. Anyways, continuing, there is at the present moment so much of the commonplace which passes as knowledge and is accepted as such by the worthy, though unthinking student, which is so utterly void of comprehension that unless a person is familiar with this line of thought, he would not really be able to see the truth in the bearing of the statement that man always becomes that which he really attempts to live and practice. This is the fundamental reason why the mere inculcation of moral precepts so often fails entirely in transforming character, and why there is so much lip service and so little actual service one for the other. When men once comprehend this, they will understand the mystery of alchemy, the transformation or transmutation of baser metals into the pure and shining gold. Once the conscience has become awakened and they have learned to know, they will begin to become. For in the process of doing will it commence to know and thus become. Conscience is the struggle of the understanding in assimilating experience. It is the effort of the individual to adjust precept with practice. Or, in other words, conscience is the living, active something which acts as an incentive to do, thus helping the growth of the soul and the increase of man's power to apprehend the truth and to apply it in everyday life. Thus, while man is learning, if he also lives, he is actually growing or transmuting, and the process will be far advanced ere he is aware of any great growth made. In the ancient mysteries, life presented itself to the candidate or neophyte as a problem to be solved, and not merely as certain propositions. Let me go back here. In the ancient mysteries, life presented itself to the candidate or neophyte as a problem to be solved, and not merely as certain propositions to be memorized and then forgotten. The solution of the problem constituted all genuine initiation, and at every step or quote-unquote degree expanded. Therefore, man, know thyself, quote, man knows thyself, unquote, was written above the door of every temple wherein were taught the ancient mysteries and initiation accomplished. And you can find that all over the place in antiquity. As the vision of the neophyte enlarged in relation to the labors and meaning of life, his power of apprehension and assimilation also increased proportionately. This was likewise in evolution. The lower degrees of such initiation concern the ordinary affairs of life, namely a knowledge of the laws and processes of external nature. The neophyte's relation to these through his physical body, and his relations on the physical plane through his animal senses and social instincts to his family and fellow men. These things being learned through experience and development, not merely memorized, the neophyte passes on to the next degree. Here he learns the nature of his soul and the process of its development, and begins to unfold those finer instincts which have been so often referred to in books dealing with initiation. If he is found capable of understanding these and keeps his vow in the preceding degrees, he presently discovers the evolution within him of senses and faculties pertaining to the, quote, soul plane, unquote. his progress would be instantly arrested and his teachers refuse him all further instructions if he were found negligent of the ordinary duties of life, those to his family, his neighbors, or his country. All these duties must be fully discharged before he can stand upon the threshold of the great mysteries, because in these he becomes to be an unselfish servant to humanity as a whole. There is no longer the right to bestow the gifts of knowledge or power that he possesses upon his own kinsmen or friends in preference to others who might more justly claim these through the law of greater necessity. In the higher degrees, he may even be precluded from using his powers to preserve his own life or protect his own property. Both the initiate and his powers belong to humanity. The readers will but consider how those who crucified Jesus called upon him in mockery to, quote, save himself and to come down from the cross, unquote. If he were the Christ, it may be readily understood that this doctrine of supreme unselfishness ought long ago to have been apprehended by the Christian world, for while it is a divine attribute, the synonym of the Christ, it is latent in all humanity and must be evolved in all if it is to be of service to a greater humanity. Though it must not be understood for a moment that the initiate gives to all alike, whether worthy or unworthy, because giving to the unworthy or those who can help themselves, he would merely weaken them instead of strengthening them, even to curse. That which seems to make such an evolution possible is that it cannot be conceived as being accomplishable in a single life, nor can it be. It is the result of persistent effort guided by high ideals through many lives. I wonder if that's a reference to reincarnation. Those who deny pre-existence may logically deny all such evolution. There must, however, come a time when the consummation is reached in one life. This may be in our present life. This is the logical meaning of the saying of Jesus, it is finished. Today, many of those who have not the honor to belong to any of the secret fraternities know there were both an exoteric and esoteric doctrine with the early Christians, that the esoteric doctrines were communicated orally in the mysteries of initiation, and that these mysteries conformed to and were originally derived from those of so-called pagan world. Okay, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's Phoenician and Egyptian related. Absolutely. I'm going to prove that not prove that, but I'll give my evidence to that in future videos. But this is definitely a line I would like to just do a quick highlight. Yeah. Oh, I don't have permission. Oh well. So, I'm going to read that again because that's such an important statement. Today, many of those who have not the honor to belong to us, and look, I don't belong to any secret fraternities. I don't belong to anything. You don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you the honest to God truth. There's so much information out there about this. It's really not as secret as you might think it is. The secret is how to put it all together. It's the key, as they say, as they keep saying. Just like they say how the lodges lost the key. Well, the key is part of waking up. The key is when you get to the point where you're like, holy smokes, and you realize what's behind the whole deal. And that's really a crazy thing to experience. Give me 1 second, I'll be right Okay, here we go. Sorry, I had to put another piece of wood in my stove. Continuing. Oh, yeah, I'm rereading this. So, today, many of those who have not the honor to belong to any secret fraternities know there were both an exoteric and esoteric doctrine with the early Christians, that the esoteric doctrines were communicated orally in the mysteries of initiation, and that these mysteries conformed to and were originally derived from those of the so called pagan world. The mysteries of the Christ received a new interpretation after the First Nicene Council, and as the Church sought domination, it lost the great secret. Since then, it has denied that it ever existed and has done all in its power to obliterate all its records and monuments. Holy smokes. That's quite the statement. But I can tell you that the videos I got coming up are going to really add to that statement. So, history, both sacred and profane, proves this. Uh, I like this guy. He's funny. Tertullian, who died about AD 216, says in his Apology, quote, "None are admitted to the religious mysteries without an oath of secrecy. We appeal to your Thracian and Eleusinian mysteries, and we are specially bound to this caution because if we prove faithless, we should not only provoke heaven, but draw upon our heads the utmost rigor of human displeasure," unquote. And it's got a little thing here. So I'll read that. Many students of the mysteries have had the mistaken idea that the masters or initiates in the secret schools draw a curse upon those students who break their vow, having been led to this belief because sorrow, suffering, and ultimate misfortune always follows such broken vows. Neither master, initiate, or teacher ever pronounces a curse. On the contrary, the student, through the law he himself sets in motion when he takes the vow, brings upon himself sorrow, misery, suffering, and misfortune if he proves disloyal. A vow is like a boomerang. If thrown straight, it will continue forward. When misdirected, will return and destroy the one responsible. Yes, okay. Archelaus, bishop of Cascara in Mesopotamia, the year 278, said, quote, "These mysteries the Church now communicates to him who has passed through the introductory degree. These are not explained to the Gentiles at all, nor are they taught in the hearing of the catechumens, but much that is spoken is in disguised terms, that the faithful who possess the knowledge may be still more informed, and those who are not acquainted with it may suffer no disadvantage." The Council of Nicaea had not taken the secret schools and occult fraternities into consideration, nor did they know much concerning them. The council had knowledge such schools and orders existed, but were under the mistaken impression that they were only for the purpose of pagan initiations, and had no knowledge of the fact that these secret schools and orders possessed records to be handed down from initiate to initiate for all time to come, that the keys to the sacred mysteries could never be lost to the secret schools and occult orders. Saint Basil, the great bishop of Caesarea, says, we receive the dogmas transmitted to us by writing, and those which have descended to us from the apostles, and beneath the mystery of oral tradition. For several things have been handed to us without writing, lest the vulgar, too familiar with our dogmas, should lose a due respect for them. This is why the uninitiated are not permitted to contemplate, and how should it ever be proper to write and circulate among the people an account of them, unquote. Interesting. Those who composed the Council of Nicaea undoubtedly knew the claims made by certain priests of the day that the secret mysteries were in possession of certain secret schools, but considered these assertions to be voiced by madmen and fanatics. Little or no attention was paid to them. The sublime philosophy inclusive of the sacred mysteries once taught in the greater mysteries of Egypt, India, Chaldea, Asia, Persia, likewise among many other nations of antiquity, is known neither to modern churchianity nor to any of the exoteric orders any more than it was known to the Council of Nicaea. In the year 525 BC, Cambyses, called the Mad, led an army into Egypt, overran the country, destroyed its cities, palaces, and temples, scattered its priest initiates. All the priests of the temple were initiates and instructors of the neophytes, and reduced the country to a Persian province. Many of the priests took refuge in Greece and conveyed thither the Egyptian mysteries, the same mysteries Pythagoras had journeyed to Egypt to obtain half a century earlier. Get Pythagoras as another Phoenician right there. Okay, and yes, this particular event in history really screwed stuff up. And this is also when you have another Semitic group of people suddenly show up in history. I'm just throwing that one out there. And maybe I'll do a video on that at some point. At the beginning of the Christian era, the mysteries were known only to the initiates, the priests. The masses were in ignorance as to their very existence. There remained at the time the Essenian order, as well as the Gnostics, the latter an inner circle of the Essenes. The Therapeutae of Alexandria was merely another name for a branch of the Essenian fraternity. Now, I don't know if they're going to get into this, but it doesn't look like it. Now, Essene, that word does mean healer in Aramaic, and this Therapeutae of Alexandria, the Essenes in the area of Galilee, were known as the Ashaya or Asayas. So I just want to put that out there. All right, so and I think we'll just finish off with this here. Today, the order of men, then known as the Essenes, is termed the Rosicrucians. There never has been the slightest interruption of this secret fraternity. It has many times changed its name since its foundation, but its instructions remain the same. Thus, from these orders were derived the Christian mysteries preserved in the secret archives of the great schools, known only to initiates of the higher degrees. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I do very much appreciate it. I'm going to bring you part 3 soon enough. So take care and have a wonderful day. And like, subscribe, and share if you think other people would think this is cool. Bye.